I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
All right, folks, welcome to the program. Thanks so much for being with us. Thank you. We can't do this without you listening every single day, and we really do appreciate everything that you guys do for us. I mean, if you're listening to this program, you're already a part of the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. You might be opposed to it, but you're already building a liberty machine as well. So we really do appreciate that. It is Johnny Cash Friday today, so we want to make sure that, let's just go ahead and do this again, right, shall we? Let's just go ahead and start this over, yeah. Yeah, so Johnny Cash Friday, a day where we try to listen to as much Johnny Cash music as we can, while at the same time peppering in the news and events of the day and the week for our terrestrial radio stations, of course, because Facebook and YouTube, they don't like for us to play, Johnny Cash music, or I don't know if they don't just like Johnny Cash, or they don't like music, or they don't, I don't know. The left these days, the left doesn't like so much, like comedy, for example, freedom of speech. It's not everybody, though, that's like deranged about it. There's some people that I think are at least seeing the light, and they realize that Facebook has gone way outside the purview of what's normal and acceptable here in America. One of those examples is you have the former founder or co-founder of Facebook, and he has penned an op-ed in the New York Times calling on Facebook to be split up, for the government to step in, call them a monopoly, and to divide them up into different companies. Matter of fact, in response to this op-ed, Facebook is now releasing statements. The guy's name is Hughes. The last name is Hughes. Chris Hughes. If you saw The Social Network, he was user number 5. Mark Zuckerberg was user number 4. Allegedly. I mean, this is how the story goes. And Chris Hughes was user number 5. In a response to Chris Hughes' explosive editorial, Facebook has issued a statement arguing that it shouldn't be broken up because, in short, it's a successful American company that can essentially control what protests you see, what products you see. They're selling your data. Now, are we still... Listen, again, we've had this conversation, and it's a difficult one to have. It's a delicate one to have. But if you quit Facebook, is there anything else out there actually like it? So if we'll skip down here, in the op-ed, Chris Hughes, this is from Zero Hedge, in the op-ed, Chris Hughes, Mark Zuckerberg's Harvard roommate, and the first spokesman of Facebook, that's back when you could say spokesman and not spokesperson, emphasized that he believes Zuckerberg is a kind and well-intentioned person, but that Facebook has become too powerful in terms of its market dominance and its influence on public life. Quote, I don't think Mark Zuckerberg can fix Facebook, Hughes said. I think only government can, by making the market more competitive, by breaking it up, and by creating these privacy restrictions. As it stands, the market isn't well equipped to punish Facebook for its misstates. Now, I think, was it a week ago Friday, or was it this past Monday? I can't remember. It might have been a week ago. A week ago, I'm pretty sure We were talking about conservatives being censored. Maybe this was back on Monday. I think maybe it was. And this plays right into it, by the way. But listen to this. Because Facebook so dominates social networking, Chris Hughes writes in the New York Times, it faces no market-based accountability. This means that every time Facebook messes up, whether it's Cambridge Analytica or whether they're spying on your, your instant messenger, every time they mess up, every time the public gets wind of it, every time there's a press story about what Facebook's up to, we repeat an exhausting pattern: first outrage, then disappointment, and finally resignation. And he even says here that he was like, well, you know what? I'm just going to delete Facebook. Like when the big news came about how Facebook is spying on selling people's data, essentially violating their privacy, let's just say. Now, some people think Facebook is actually listening to everything you're saying. I don't have Facebook on my phone. I mean, I still have Facebook, but I don't actually have the app anymore. And I probably shouldn't tell you that because Facebook is one of our most listened to platforms. Conduit News is one of our most listened to, social media platforms. But I'm saying, like, I don't have them on my phone because weird things started happening. Weird things started happening. You talk about something so random, something that you would never talk about, that you haven't talked about, and then all of a sudden you see an ad for it. And I can't remember. It wasn't even an item to buy. I was talking to somebody about some. It might have been a place or a. Anyway, and it was the most random word that we used to describe a place. I can't remember what it was. The next day, it's in my Facebook feed. Now, and I think YouTube may be doing some of this as well. Now, I don't know about this. This may be a little underreported, but I remember at one point, and maybe this is a coincidence, but I don't think it is. So, I do have a smart TV, not an Apple TV, but just, smart TV. And me and my wife were talking, this was months ago, well, what do you want to have for dinner now? It was like a Saturday, and what do you have for dinner? And I was like, oh, I don't know. Hey, what if we go get some tuna steaks? I haven't had tuna in a long time. I love tuna, and I do. And by the way, if you guys like tuna, the best way is just, you just soak it in soy sauce and put some sesame seeds on it, and, you sear it, a minute or two each side, and you've just got some, it's delicious, okay? And especially if you make some homemade ricotta cheese and then, like a potpourri of mushrooms to go on top of the ricotta cheese. I know, like, look at me. I'm continuing to get fatter as we talk about this. But anyway, that's actually really good. But, and then all of a sudden, I get this thing comes up on the YouTube recommendation, the Tuna King. I'm like, what? The Tuna King? What's the Tuna King? Well, and it's this Japanese guy who apparently is the king of tuna, and his whole job, he's got this katana. His whole job over in Japan is to judge what the best tuna is, and then to mark such, and you sell the better tuna at this price, and then it basically gets shipped, all across the world in some cases. And I was just like, this is come on. This thing heard me say the word tuna, and now it's wanting me to watch videos about tuna. Anyway, a lot of people think that's what Facebook is doing. Test it out. I mean, some people have done tests on this online where they'll come up with something. This one guy, I think, talked about dogs, and he did a whole YouTube video about it. But he never said the word dogs until he was writing messages and showing it to the screen, about what he was going to do, and then he started talking about it, and then Petco and dog toy ads started showing up in his feed like very soon afterwards. But anyway, so every time this happens, though, people get outraged, and that's about it. They might delete it. And this one guy, according to the New York Times op-ed, again, former Facebook spokesperson, says, well, I deleted my Facebook. Thank God for Instagram, not knowing that Facebook has bought Instagram. Facebook has also bought WhatsApp, which is basically a instant messaging service. And going to the New York Times piece, can we show the New York Times piece, Joe? The New York Times piece, which is where the actual op-ed is, again, Chris Hughes, number 5 user on Facebook. We are a nation with a tradition of reining in monopolies, no matter how well-intentioned the leaders of these companies may be. Mark's power is unprecedented and un-American. Now, I don't know what you think about, whether or not you should break up Facebook or not. Again, Facebook employees saying that they should break up Facebook. I don't know. I don't know if you believe that or not. But we can agree on this. Mark Zuckerberg's power is unprecedented. And because he's regulating speech, it is un-American, in my opinion. And I mean, so I would agree with Chris Hughes on that. It's a big deal. Yeah, it's just right under his photo. It's like the first paragraph under the photo of Mark Zuckerberg. Anyway, but bottom line is, quote, Mark's power is unprecedented and un-American. That's a quote from the op-ed, and then he calls for them to be, split up and everything else. And I don't even know what that looks like. But again, I'm going to go back to the analogy at the beginning of the week, which is the internet is now the public square. Facebook is the public square. Not a public company, but it's the public square. It's where people have taken to. It's a platform people have taken to text all kinds of stuff, to share political opinions, to share, intimate opinions. And what I mean by that is we had a running joke for a while. People would be like, this was probably 10 years ago. Is Facebook that? Yeah. People would be like, at the mall, text it. Going to the grocery store, text it. Hollering at their friends. Hey, hit me up. This is where I'm going. Text it. And then I was just like, well, what else are they going to do? What other intimate detail of their life they're going to share? Everybody on the internet. On the toilet, text it. Like, what's next? So we're gonna keep watching this. But again, if somebody had the authority to, as you were driving down the road, let's say you're going to the store, let's say you're going to the mall or wherever, and someone had the authority, the power to decide which signs you saw and which signs you didn't see on the road, would you be comfortable with that kind of power? Meaning some people can see it, other people can't see it. And there's some guy making these arbitrary decisions and filtering what you can see on the road, or what advertisement you can see as you're driving to the mall, or what billboards you can see. Would you be comfortable if there was somebody that is, it's, when you put it in this scenario, it's like supernatural type powers. Obviously, we can explain what's going on technologically, but that's, if the public square is now the internet, and the public square is now Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, and Instagram censors a disabled, wounded vet just because he met Donald Trump Jr., got a picture with him, and just posted the picture of him and a celebrity, essentially, Donald Trump Jr., what's the problem there? And Instagram takes the photo down because they're triggered by Donald Trump Jr. It's just absolutely nuts. Now, they later restored the photo, but still. We hear all this talk in Silicon Valley about algorithms. And for the life of me, it seems that this isn't algorithms at all. You're employing a bunch of progressive liberals who are, Marxists, cultural Marxists, and they don't. That's what it seems to me, and they're the ones getting triggered by it, and they're the ones with the authority, and they say, I can't, just a bunch of people. You know what I mean? Can you imagine if you were to just take, how many college seniors right now are going to end up working at Google or Facebook or whatever, and they have these radical leftist views, and they've been given these participation trophies, and they just think that they need to win. They don't have to win the argument. They now have the power to just click a button and censor somebody that has said something that triggers them or that they disagree with or that makes them mad because they've never been taught to think critically. And they just are like, they panic and they say, well, we're going to silence you. It's not really that hard of a conclusion to reach. Anybody ever see a little baby lash out or do something just to make their lives or their temporary circumstances better? Happens all the time. 870-275-9799 is the telephone number if you would like to contribute to the program. We got a great show for you, by the way. Coming up at the bottom of this hour, we're going to be talking with economist from Stockton University in New Jersey. Michael Busler's back on the program. The reason I wanted to have Michael back on is because, number one, the last time we interviewed him, we had these reports about, I believe, some GDP reports, and we got his thoughts on that. But, Michael Busler was on this program several times last year, and he was predicting this 3% growth that we have just seen. 4% growth, into the mid fours, 4.5% growth. And of course, the media is all saying that that's not possible. Well, here we have the 3+% growth that we've just seen. But we also have this China situation. If you're just joining us this morning, you do need to know that it appears, at least according to this report, that we have a situation in China with the deal that going on. Here's the headline: U.S. hikes China tariffs after talks result in no progress, and China vows to retaliate. So after much theatrics and 11th hour negotiations, the U.S. more than doubled tariffs to 25% on more than $200 billion in good imports from China just after midnight on Friday, in what has been dubbed the most dramatic step yet in Donald Trump's crusade to extract trade concessions from Beijing, deepening a nearly 2-year-old conflict that has roiled global markets and impacted the world economy. So that's where we are right now, and this is going to continue, I think, for the foreseeable future. I know it definitely hurts China's economy more than ours. They say that they're going to retaliate in some way. We'll have to wait and see what that is. But at least the report that I have right now is that U.S. has hiked the China tariffs after the talks resulted in no progress. We'll talk to economist Michael Busler about what he thinks about that as well, coming up at 6:33. Then at 7:33, we're going to be talking with State Senator Terry Rice. We'll be back on the program. He's going to be giving his impression of the session 2019. It's always great to talk to Terry. I look forward to speaking with him. Also, we're going to take a break here, get us some Johnny Cash music. But has anybody noticed that these guys like John Brennan, Clapper, specifically James Comey, are making the rounds like they've got a book to sell still? And so my question this morning, as I was looking at these headlines, is why in the world is a former FBI director so publicly going around to the mainstream media outlets criticizing Mueller, criticizing Trump, saying that Trump would have been indicted if he hadn't been president? What is he doing exactly? Why is he doing this? Is it because he's a Boy Scout that cares about America? Or is it part of the scheme to make William Barr less credible, so if charges come on Obama administration officials, and it's like, well, James Comey can't be arrested. I trust him. I just saw him on the Today Show. Is that what's really going on here? Tell me what you think. Facebook.com/Conduit News. We'll be back in just a moment.
It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Hey, please welcome back to the program. We've got State Representative Robin Lundstrom on the line. She's from District 87. Robin, good morning.
Good morning.
It's always great to have you on, and I know we did this 2 years ago. This specific segment. This is our impression of the session. Session is now over, so I'm going to just give it to you. You can take it away, and then we can get into specifics later. State Representative Robin Lundstrom, what was your impression of the session 2019?
It depends on. There are a lot of different impressions. There's some things that are good. I think we got some things done in some areas that I thought we did a really good job in, and then other areas I thought we spent too much money. It just depends on your political views. If you're a moderate, you're probably really happy. If you're a Democrat, you're probably really happy. If you're a conservative, you're probably a little on the grumpy side. So it just kind of depends on how you look at things. We did get some good things done as far as business tax cuts. I thought we did a great job in that area. We passed a $62 million unemployment tax cut. That was my baby, so obviously I'm a little proud of that one.
Yes.
So there were some things that got done in those areas. Education, got some things done there. Boxing, medical marijuana, and a little bit more before the Pandora gets out of the box. Finally got some of that done, which in the nick of time.
Yeah, now the marijuana thing, that was one to try to kind of regulate edibles. Is that the one you're talking about?
Yes, medical marijuana. We needed to regulate edibles, so there'd be no gummy bears, no gummy worms, things sold to kids, chocolate, cookies, that type of deal, and then no medical marijuana advertising. So you're not driving down the road seeing gummy bears and your kids going, "Hey, Mom, I want some gummy worms." Kids thinking that was okay. You know, we need to keep it medical. So that got done, which I was thrilled. So there were some things that did get done. It was kind of scattered. It was a better run session as far as we didn't have as many bills filed. And so just that, to me, that's a better, in the long run, less is better.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. I think you're right. There were some good things done. I love the social aspect this time. I thought it was really good. What you guys did on the pro-life side of things was very, very good.
Oh, definitely.
Very strong. And now, we're in a position, if Roe versus Wade is struck down, Arkansas abortion pretty much becomes illegal.
Yes.
If that happens.
And
go ahead.
That's right. And then also we had the 18-week abortion ban, which is fantastic. I love what Jason Rayford and Mary Bentley did. That's a preemptive strike. We don't have to wait now and come back 2 years later. If Roe versus Wade gets struck down, immediately that law goes into effect. And people at first, when that bill was filed, was like, that's just show pony stuff. And it's not, because at any point in time, any state that challenges Roe versus Wade or when Planned Parenthood challenges it and takes the state to court and it ends up in the Supreme Court, you don't know what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. So always being prepared is a good deal.
We're talking,
and then the 18-week abortion ban, rolling that back was good.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's just, that's science and, a baby's viability is more and more we're realizing, that this, to me, it's life at conception, but you know what I mean? We try to save as many lives as we possibly can by rolling it back more and more. And I know you agree, and I think Arkansas is such a pro-life state, and I'm very thankful in light of the fact, Robin, that we have, New York and North Carolina and these other states who are taking the opposite approach on this issue. It's good to be in Arkansas.
Welcome back.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Who's ready for that internet sales tax to start being collected in July? Are you ready for it? I'm stoked for it, right? I can't wait to pay more money to the government to save Main Street businesses. To save Main Street businesses who need to be saved. If we just tax the internet, we can save this country, and or we can just forget about it. You decide. You decide. Come on. Remember that argument? You really buy that argument? Internet sales tax will save more money to the government, will somehow save Main Street businesses from people like you that buy stuff on the internet. Yeah. More money to the government will save the Main Street businesses from people like you that are shopping on the internet for convenience. Who's ready for that half-cent sales tax to not sunset, right? Right? What's crazy is we've been voting for Republicans in Arkansas for, pretty much 10 years, and who knew this is what we wanted? Who knew? We've been we've been asking for limited government, but we've also been asking these politicians, begging them, like, hey, the next time a tax is set to sunset, do us a favor and check with us to make sure we're okay with it first. Hey, by the way, let's make sure I'm voting for you, Republicans, because I want you to raise my gas tax. That's what I sent you there to do. Anyway, by the way, who's ready for that? October, 3 cents more a gallon, they say, in October. By the way, I want to remind you that might have been unconstitutional because they didn't get 75% of vote. They went around Amendment 19, right? Is it 19 of the Arkansas Constitution? Or at least some people think that's what happened. Anyway, we're going to be right back with economist Michael Busler calling in from New Jersey. Back in a minute.
I love what Jason Rayford and Mary Bentley did. That's a preemptive strike. We don't have to wait now and come back 2 years later. If Roe versus Wade gets struck down, immediately that law goes into effect. And people at first, when that bill was filed, was like, that's just show pony stuff. And it's not, because at any point in time, any state that challenges Roe versus Wade or when Planned Parenthood challenges it and takes the state to court and it ends up in the Supreme Court, you don't know what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. So always being prepared is a good deal.
We're talking,
and then the 18-week abortion ban, rolling that back was good.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's just, that's science and, a baby's viability. Just more and more we're realizing, that this, to me, it's life at conception, but you know what I mean? We try to save as many lives as we possibly can by rolling it back more and more. And I know you agree, and I think Arkansas is such a pro-life state, and I'm very thankful in light of the fact, Robin, that we have, New York and North Carolina and these other states who are taking the opposite approach on this issue. It's good to be an Arkansan because our leaders are saying, no, that's not what we believe in. We believe in life.
That's right. I was really pleased in that area. I was pleased we didn't do a bunch of gun bills that didn't move the ball forward and just caused a lot of drama. I feel like when we do that, we open ourselves up and don't get things done in that area. If we can't strengthen our gun laws, I don't want to mess with them. So we didn't. I was pleased with we did tackle some unemployment fraud. Now, if you commit unemployment fraud in Arkansas, not only do you have to pay it back, but you have to pay it back plus a fine before you can get unemployment again. Mm-hmm. So there were things like that they weren't very sexy. They didn't end up in the papers. But those are things that are going to help employers and help our system function a little bit better.
Again, we're talking with State Representative Robin Lundstrom. I'd like to talk about some of your no votes. 3 of your no votes specifically that are, I think, fantastic votes. You voted against the internet sales tax, which is more money from the people to the government. You voted against the gas tax increase, which would have been more money from the people to the government, and you voted against the levy of a 0.5% sales tax that's set to expire to go back to the people to make sure they want it to expire in 2020. So, voting against all of those big revenue takers from the people, how did you come to the conclusion, State Representative Robin Lundstrom, that this was a bad idea?
Well, we have plenty of money in Little Rock. We just need to spend it wisely. And I think in some areas we do, in some areas we don't. We just don't need to take any more money from the people. And on the internet sales tax, there's just got to be a better way to do this. There were some things in that bill that we definitely needed, but it was one of those things that they put all the good stuff in and then one bad thing. Mm-hmm. And it still wouldn't have made it. It still wouldn't have made it a yes vote for me. Internet sales, I get it. It's coming. It's already here. I would rather have lowered the sales tax altogether and made the internet sales tax part of it. But we don't need more taxes. We just need to spend what we have better. So I've got the budget numbers up in front of me, and we have a huge budget. We just also have some big budget crunchers, and education being one of them, higher education. I'm not saying we need to stop spending on those things, but we do need to spend more wisely in what we do.
So
where we do spend our money.
I completely agree with that, and I think there at some point in the future there needs to be maybe a more serious conversation about spending. Meaning, if you had to have the $95 million for All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the program on this Johnny Cash Friday. We appreciate you being with us. Welcome back to the program. We got Michael Busler is back with us. It's always great to have him on. Dr. Michael Busler, he's a public policy analyst, economics expert, professor of finance at Stockton University in New Jersey. Michael, how's it going, sir?
It's going very well this morning, Paul. Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. It's always great to have you on. I want to talk about a couple of things. I want to talk about GDP because you were on the program a bunch last year as well as this year, talking about what that's going to be. We've had some positive numbers there, but before, let's talk about maybe the more pressing issue, which is China, the United States. According to the latest report that I saw, looks like the United States went ahead and hiked those tariffs on China like they said they were going to. They tried to get some 11th hour negotiations going, but it didn't seem like those were fruitful. Is that what you're hearing as well?
Yes, that's exactly right. They did negotiate into last night, up till midnight when the deadline was. They couldn't come up with an agreement, so they ended the meeting. The tariffs will go into effect. They are coming back first thing this morning, though, and trying to renegotiate something. This is something that President Trump really doesn't want to do. He doesn't want to put tariffs on really anything. He'd much prefer not to have a long-term agreement where there are no tariffs. The problem is China is not in any hurry to negotiate, and the reason is that the current trade agreements all favor our trading partners and to the detriment of the U.S. For instance, we make a car here in the U.S. We sell it in Europe, for instance. They put a 10% tariff on. They make a car in Europe, sell it over here. We put only a 2.5% tariff. Same thing with China. They make a car there, sell it in the U.S. We put a 2.5% tariff. They put a 25% tariff on some of our cars. So President Trump wants to get the playing field level. His first goal would be to have no tariffs on anything. But since China is in such a favorable current position, they're in no hurry to negotiate. Well, President Trump, he's not a politician, he's a business person. A business person, when you have a negotiation with a reluctant partner, you want to create a sense of urgency, and that's what he's doing by these tariffs, creating a sense of urgency. They thought they had an agreement a couple of months ago that was really just down to some final details. According to what I'm hearing, China has reneged on some of those agreements. So as a result of that, President Trump, again, wants to create a sense of urgency, and he said, look, if you don't resolve this by Friday, today, I'm going to put heavy tariffs on. You'll notice that quickly brought China to the bargaining table. They sent their vice premier over here yesterday to try to come up with something. They weren't able to do that. But by putting on the tariffs, there will be some short-term pain. But the idea is to create some long-term gain and finally bring China to the table.
And you know what? I think it's kind of a waiting game. If you're just looking at the economic situation. Now, I'm sure the Trump administration wants to keep, geopolitical negotiations with North Korea a completely separate issue. But have you heard anybody ask whether or not China is having some influence on North Korea testing these missiles again? Not the ballistic ones, but just these short-range ones. Is that maybe them trying to say, hey, maybe, we'll make you look really bad because we've got influence over Kim?
Well, as you mentioned, these are very complicated negotiations, and we're not just dealing with some economic factors. There's geopolitical factors. Usually what business people do is they try to resolve one issue at a time. So I imagine President Trump and his team will concentrate on resolving this trade agreement, and if they can do that, then they'll also start to talk about the North Korea situation, which seems to be escalating since, as you mentioned, North Korea did fire 2 short-range missiles. Now, the U.S. fired some missiles yesterday also, showing what we can do. We certainly don't want to get into a war, but President Trump has the position, you seek peace through strength, This is something that Ronald Reagan instituted, and it worked extremely well. So President Trump is going to show that we're very strong, and as long as the other nations see how strong we are, they should be very reluctant to do anything militarily. But the idea is, let's get this trade agreement resolved first, and then we'll move on, I think, to these geopolitical events.
I certainly hope so, and I guess I know that China, or at least the word is that China was helpful. They wanted, North Korea to no longer be this, this loaded gun that's kind of just pointed at the head of the entire world, and so I know that, but I just kind of thought here, it's at least what we're hearing is that these tariffs are way worse on China than they are on the United States. And they are bad on the United States in some instances. Is it really just a waiting game? We just have to wait for China to come to their senses?
Yeah, and you brought up a very good point. This trade war, which we're in, will hurt China far more than it hurts us. They need us more than we need them. So we put tariffs on their goods like steel. We put a tariff on Chinese steel, becomes expensive. The U.S. then can make their own steel, which is what's our own steel, which is happening now. China retaliates.
And let me just stop you there. That's also a national security thing, too. Like, I would rather we make U.S. steel to build our own military equipment than import anything. I think that's just my opinion, but go ahead, Michael.
I'll tell you, I would agree with you. I'd rather pay a little bit more for the steel, but have the security of knowing we can make our own steel, because if you have to go to war, you need bullets and tanks and things, so you certainly have to have that steel. So the China will retaliate. The issue is that China imports from the U.S. food products, and the reason they do that is they don't have the ability, the right climate, to grow all of their own food, especially for the 1.2 billion people. So if China starts putting tariffs on food, which is what they're going to do, that will drive up the cost of food, and there won't be as much food to go around in China. That's going to create a lot of problems for them too. And I think the Trump administration realizes that, and as a result, the Trump administration is willing to accept some short-term pain, and there will be some short-term pain. Agricultural sectors will suffer a little bit, and some other products will suffer. Americans may pay a little bit more for some things, although a lot of the tariffs are not resulting in price increases. So China is actually paying some of the tariff. It's not being passed on to consumers. So President Trump is willing to deal with whatever short-term pain we have to deal with to get a long-term agreement where these markets, China market, is now open freely to American manufacturers, both in the agricultural sector and other sectors. The other key point is China does not recognize intellectual property rights. In other words, if somebody in the U.S. comes up with a new design for something or a new formula for something, they get a patent on it, and the patent says, look, we recognize you've invested a lot of money to bring a product to the market. We're going to help ensure that that's at least profitable for you so the product can stay there. So for 17 years, nobody else is allowed to make that product. Now, China, India is like this too. They don't honor those intellectual property rights. So they'll get the product, they'll take it apart, figure out how to make it, and start producing a product over there. And that ends up clobbering U.S. manufacturers. So Trump wants an agreement where China will, and this is really the sticking point in the negotiations, where China will recognize their intellectual property rights and stop copying things that they're not supposed to be copying.
Yep, that is going to be a sticking point because, I mean, this, you always eventually get these knockoffs, and in some cases you get them, you get the knockoffs and they lie and they put the original brand back on, and there are manufacturers that have discovered this over and over again. Like they go out to service a machine of some kind and they're like, well, we didn't build this. This didn't actually come from us. It has our logo on it, but not ours.
Right.
So we're talking with Michael Busler, and let me ask you this. you're on Conduit News here. We're on several stations across Arkansas, broadcasting online as well. We got a lot of soybean farmers here in Arkansas. So what would you say to them? Because, some people have said, hey, look, we're willing to kind of suffer a little bit in the short term here in order to kind of reclaim United States sovereignty in a way. What would you say to Arkansas soybean farmers?
Well, President Trump did allocate some funding for, this was done last year, for agricultural farmers who would be hurt by this. What we would say to them is, look, I know this is going to hurt you, but it will be only short term. China does need our food more than we need whatever products they're making. So I know it's tough, and it's going to hurt a little bit, but if you can absorb the short-term pain, we should be able to come up with an agreement that forever these markets will now be open to you freely, and the short-term pain that you're feeling now should be more than offset by the long-term gain that should come out of these negotiations.
And I would also add to that, Michael, that the farmers who have that mentality are patriots, because there's a real imbalance out there, and President Trump's trying to fix something that's been put off for decades by politicians that claim to be for the common man, but they're really not. We're talking with Michael Bustler. Okay, let's talk about, last year, you and I talked, and there was all these articles about how the economy's not going to, be, we're not going to get to 3%. I know we had you on, you said, hey, some point this year, 4% might even be possible. And then, you just have all of these naysayers, and yet job growth is through the roof, and we get the news, I guess this is April 26th, that U.S. GDP grows by 3.2% in the first quarter. And I know, Dr. Michael Bustler, this wasn't a surprise to you, but it was to a lot of people.
Yeah. I think the people that are forecasting have a little bit of bias in that they don't like President Trump and they don't want to see him succeed, even though if he succeeds, of course, the whole country succeeds. What President Trump did was he put through a tax cut modeled after the tax cut that Reagan did in 1981 and somewhat similar to what Kennedy and Johnson did back in 63. So they lowered taxes for all income earners. That meant for the middle class, they had more money to spend. That increases demand in the economy and should lead to more growth. They also cut taxes for higher income earners and corporations. Why is that important? Higher income individuals and corporations, after taxes, the income that they have goes into capital. They end up investing it. So not only will demand pick up in the economy from the middle class, but now businesses will be able to expand supply to meet the new demand because they have capital, new capital. We have a capital-intensive economy, which means most of the things we make today are not made by hand like they used to be, but rather made by robots and artificial intelligence and machinery. So we need capital in order to be able to expand. This tax cut created demand for by the middle class and created an increase in supply by cutting taxes for the upper classes. It will lead to more economic growth. When Reagan did it in 81, it went into effect in 82, coming right out of a very severe recession ending in 81. The tax cut goes into effect in 82. In 1984, GDP grew at 7.5% for the year. Now, I don't think we'll get to that, but I still see stronger economic growth. And if everybody would stop, or not everybody, but if a large number of people would stop fighting President Trump and work with him a little bit, we'd be able to see even higher growth. I'm forecasting this year to have economic growth better than we did last year. And last year was the first year since 2005 that economic growth was at least 3%. From 2005 to 2017, we averaged just over 2% annual growth, and it led to a lot of problems. Last year, we had growth of about 3%. I think as business investment starts to kick in and the economy starts to grow, we're already seeing new jobs being created, record low unemployment numbers. It's to the point today, anybody who really wants to get a job should be able to find one. Since last July, there are more job openings than there are unemployed people.
Wow.
So there are opportunities there. As this all filters through the economy, I see this year economic growth exceeding what we did last year, and that should go a few years into the future. Some economists were talking recession this year. I think there's virtually extremely low chance, almost no chance of that happening. I don't see a recession coming for at least 3 or 4 years down the road.
Yeah, and again, I would say the first quarter was 3.2. I heard, correct me if I'm wrong, but traditionally, isn't that first quarter the worst of the other the four?
Yeah, the first quarter is, and if you look back in the last 5 or 6 years, the first quarter was always the lowest. Even last year, the first quarter was only in the 2% range. The second quarter was 4.5%. Now, I don't know. Second quarter is typically a very good one, as is the third quarter. So we could see numbers for the second quarter. Probably, we have a shot to hit that 4% range again. The consensus view is that we'll only be in the 2% range. But again, I think the economy is doing better than that, and I think we could see a 4% number in the current quarter.
Last question. Next year we have the presidential election. Do you think there's a possibility, because I don't believe the Fed is a non-political organization, do you think they could put their thumb on the scale to try to make the economy worse so President Trump has a harder time getting reelected?
I might have said yes 6 months ago, but there's been so much pressure put on the Fed now to stop raising interest rates so fast that I don't think they're going to be able to do that. Remember, in 2018, we had just about 3% annual growth. The Federal Reserve raised interest rates 4 times in 2018. Had they not done that, we might have had even higher. We definitely, I think, would have had even higher growth. So I don't think the Federal Reserve is going to raise interest rates at all this year or even into next year. Now, what might change that? Well, they'll raise interest rates if inflation starts to become a problem. I don't see that happening either for 2 reasons. One, there's a fear when wages are increasing at over a 3% rate, which is good for workers, wages are going up. The problem is, the Federal Reserve notes, if wages go up, labor costs are going to go up, and that could be inflationary. Well, if you take a look at productivity in the first quarter of this year increased by 3.6%. So if your labor costs go up by 3.2, but they're making 3.6 more things, the cost per unit doesn't go up at all. So there's no pressure from wages as long as productivity stays high, and because we have capital to invest, I think that will happen. As long as productivity stays high, wage increases will not cause inflation. Secondly, as I mentioned before, this tax cut was geared not just to increase demand, but economists would say this was also a supply-side tax cut. So if demand starts heating up, it's only a problem if business doesn't have the ability to increase output to meet the demand. If they can't meet the demand by increasing output, then they're going to have to raise prices. But in this case, because of the tax cut creating capital, they should be able to meet the new demand by increasing supply that increases economic growth without any inflationary pressure. So because I don't see any inflationary pressure and the political climate is such that I don't think the Federal Reserve will raise interest rates, I don't see them raising interest rates at all before the election.
Dr. Michael Busler, it's always great to have you on. I appreciate your analysis. It's very enlightening, and I love the specifics too, because a lot of times you don't get that, but really encouraging. I really appreciate your mind, sir.
Thank you, Paul. It's my pleasure to be here. I look forward to talking to you again.
Absolutely, yes, sir. It's Dr. Michael Bustler, everybody, public policy analyst from Stockton University in New Jersey. You can go to Newsmax, LifeZet, Town Hall, and you can check out articles that have been written by him that are posted on those sites. We're going to take a break. The telephone number 870-275-9799. Back in just a moment.
Are you a conservative-minded young person and want to let the world know about it? Are you tired of rolling your eyes as your professor regurgitates progressive, PC, neo-Marxist nonsense? Then you should interview on Conduit News Radio's Young Conservative segment and tell us about why you believe the way you do. Tell us how you came to be a conservative and what are your views on government. Now, if you're worried that your neo-Marxist professor may also be a right-wing talk radio listening masochist, then names can be changed to protect the innocent. It's the Conduit News Radio Conservative Future segment. To be interviewed, call 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
It still wouldn't have made it a yes vote for me. Internet sales, I get it. It's coming. It's already here. I would rather have lowered the sales tax altogether and made the internet sales tax part of it. But we don't need more taxes. We just need to spend what we have better. So I've got the budget numbers up in front of me, and we have a huge budget. We just also have some big budget crunchers, and education being one of them, higher education. I'm not saying we need to stop spending on those things, but we do need to spend more wisely in what we do.
So
where we do spend our money.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, and I think there at some point in the future there needs to be maybe a more serious conversation about spending. Meaning, if you had to have the $95 million from the gas tax or the 100, whatever it is. Well. All right, folks, welcome back to the program. Hey, next week on the program, we'll be talking with State Representative Grant Hodges. On Monday, we'll be talking with Washington County Justice of the Peace Patrick Deakins as well. Then on Tuesday, Sally C. Pipes from Pacific Research. She was recently on the Mark Levin show, the Fox News show. Sally C. Pipes, we're going to talk about socialized medicine and why it's no good. State Representative Joe Cloud will also be on next week. We'll be also interviewing Chris Ann Hall during our segment, our Patriots Vec 746 segment. I want to introduce you also to the Yell County Assessor next week as well. And then we have a really special treat on Thursday. I'll tell you more about that next week. And, still more to come. So also coming up next hour, we'll be talking to Senator Terry Rice. That's at the bottom of the next hour. Don't go anywhere, folks. One more hour of Conduit News Radio coming your way next.
and talk of Northeast Arkansas. This is News Talk 101.3 FM and 12:30 AM KBTM, Jonesboro, an EAB radio station.
Maybe try to find that in savings somewhere else. But let me ask you this, because I've been asking everybody this. Do you think when it's all said and done after this session, at least for the next few fiscal years, that the people of Arkansas are going to be paying more money to the government than they were before?
I do think we are in some areas. Now, when you cut taxes, you're not going to be paying as much. Well, income tax are a good. I think we needed to do that. I think that was a promise that we made, and we needed to do. Now, do we need to tighten up some loopholes? Yes. There have been loopholes. Good lobbyists over the last 30 or 40 years have found loopholes and have made those loopholes. We need to cut some of those things out. I think we're about it even. Going back to the spending cuts, I want to talk about that, or going back to what the government has. We have $7.1 billion of revenue.
Wow.
So we could, just a spending cut of maybe 1%, we could put that towards highways. So there's ways to do that. And I also like what Asa did on the transformation. Mm-hmm. We don't need that many government department heads. So I think he was moving in the right direction on that. And that's going to make it easier to do some spending cuts in the future. So there's a way to do that. There's a way to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea of the government transformation, that the governor came up with 100%. I hope we see the results of that. I hope the results are good, and it's certainly going to be waiting to see that. But I guess that's the. I guess my question was, it would have been one thing if we would have gone to the people and let's just first of all, let's back up. Let's talk about the income tax cut. That was great. That was a great thing that the governor proposed, and I supported it. Mm-hmm. It was a clean bill, right? And it was just like, hey, we're going to take the income tax rate and we're going to take it from 6.9 to 5.9. Over the next couple of years. So that was really good.
Yep.
And then it's like, well, we're gonna raise the gas tax, essentially get the amount of money that we just lowered the income tax, and then comes all of these other revenue generators as well. So
right. I would have rather just cut the taxes and let it be at that, and then made a 1% spending cut and put that towards highways. Take the casinos up on their offer, and taking all the taxes from the casinos, put that towards highways. Mm-hmm. There were other plans out there. They just didn't get chosen, and that's how the process works. I mean, you offer your plan, and the body chooses the plan that they want to choose. That's how the process works.
So we're talking with State Representative Robin Lundstrom. There were two things that kind of happened towards the end of the session. And one of them was the Sanctuary Cities bill of Senator Gary Stubblefield. It was kind of controversial. It was really, the left kind of came out in full force. The Democrats saying this is wrong. Some people saying, I think one of your colleagues on the floor, a Democrat, he said this was unchristian to do this. But you guys held strong, and you decided to say, listen, if there's a sanctuary city that pops up in Arkansas, we should be able to defund it.
That's right. Well, it shouldn't pop up now, because we know ahead of time it's illegal. It's illegal, period, for sanctuary cities. We don't need sanctuary cities in this country. I think we don't need to fund them at all. If you have a sanctuary city in your state, you don't need to get any money whatsoever. No state money, no federal money, period. So sanctuary city just says, bring all the illegal criminal individuals here. That's wrong. I didn't think it was that controversial at all. I thought it was appropriate and good timing, and off we went.
Yeah, well, and it was an example. I agree. To me, it's just a no-brainer. To you, it's a no-brainer. But the media, they certainly the mainstream media, they were covering it the way they were, and I just thought it was a good example of the Republican Party, especially at the last minute when it could have been easily tripped up with a snag. And there were some procedural maneuvers attempted to be made by State Representative Charles Blake to try to stop it because they all knew we were running out of time, and yet the governor signed it. It all went through. So it was a really good, I thought really good moment for the state as a whole, and also in light of the fact, I don't know if you remember, but Robin, right.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
All right, folks, welcome back to the program. Thanks so much for being with us today. This is hour number 2, and the intersection of conservative ideas and reality, building a liberty machine. Here, coming up at the bottom of this hour, Senator Terry Rice will be joining us, giving his impression of the session. So, interestingly enough, we've told you this. So it appears, or we already know this. So State Representative Dan Sullivan, will be running in a Republican primary against Senator John Cooper. So this is going to be very interesting. Well, I suppose it's a rematch, is what it is. And now there are voting records. There are voting records galore for these two individuals. And Senator John Cooper yesterday made it official that he will, in fact, get in the race. Senator Cooper used to be on this program quite frequently, especially when he was running for office. And then, of course, there was a change in Senator Cooper. And he went down and failed to do, matter of fact, killed the one thing he said he was going to do, which was stand up and be against Medicaid expansion here in the state of Arkansas. There were many people that backed him, many grassroots. People traveled from all over the state to knock doors for him. And then, of course, he failed at that task and, thought differently about it. Now, of course, this is for District 21, which is in northeast Arkansas, Craighead County. Here is the write-up in the Jonesboro Sun today. State Senator John Cooper, Republican, has announced to seek re-election. This is portions of Craighead County, including Brooklyn, Bono, Cass, Egypt, Jonesboro, and Lake City. If opposed, the Republican primary will be held on March the 3rd, 2020, with the general election on November 3rd. This is the quote from Senator Cooper in the Sun. It's a special to the Sun. It's a very positive write-up. Quote, "In my first election, I pledged to never waver from my conservative principles," Cooper said in a press release. "Holding true to that, I've continued to fight for lower taxes, improved access to health care, more educational opportunities, and less government involvement in our lives." So Senator Cooper voted against Bob Ballinger's Stand Your Ground bill. This was the same bill that Democrat Stephanie Flowers had a emotional meltdown at. That was a national news story for a while, and continued to fight access to health care. That was never a campaign promise concerning the fact that he was against Medicaid expansion, which was a giant. He was against Medicaid expansion, meaning we would roll back the program. And there's ample audio out there that is very clear about all of this. Anyway, that's going to be a very, very interesting race in the Jonesboro area coming up, and I guess that'll be in. Now, of course, the Sun says F unopposed, but Michael Wickline has even tweeted that Dan Sullivan intends to challenge John Cooper. And I know there's a big event in Jonesboro with Dan Sullivan coming up on the 23rd, Thursday, the 23rd of May. So anyway, we'll have more details as that comes. But I wanted to bring that story to you. I thought it was interesting. That's a limited government. You've stood close to your principles that you campaigned on. That's something that's an interesting claim. Interesting claim to run on that. I mean, you know, we've seen this time and time again. This is what happens when establishment people have to go. Establishment politicians have to go back to the people, and obviously they're not going to say that they wavered on their. I mean, they're going to say, "Well, I compromised some of them," but for most 80% of the time, I was with you and I did what I said I was going to do. No one's going to say that. Telephone number 870-275-9799 if you would like to contribute to the conversation. We're broadcasting across Arkansas on some great stations, and so we thank this local station, your local station, for carrying the program, as well as digital platforms like Facebook.com/Conduit News, our YouTube channel. Please please subscribe to the YouTube channel and click the little bell to receive notifications. All right, so let's go on to this next story, shall we? We have a story out of the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette where there has been an audit of AETN. This is the public television, the state television network, if you will. To me, AETN is the station that broadcasts the Celtic Thunder Christmas specials around Christmas time. I mean, that's really all I know of AETN. I mean, they also do debates, but yeah, so I'm busting myself out. So you watching Celtic Thunder? Well, I mean, one time, yeah. It was my wife was like, "Oh, there's a bunch of, I don't know. They're this singing group. There's this male singing group that goes out on stage, and they're from, they're all from across the pond, as they say. They're all from Ireland, and I don't know if they're all from Ireland, but you know what I mean. And they do these little numbers, and it's like they've got this Christmas special that, anyway, I've seen it on AETN. That's all. So the executive leaders of the State Educational Television Network agree that there are negative findings that result from an audit, and it's not good either. It has to do with partnering between AETN, the Arkansas Educational Television Network, and PBS over a contract that ended up enriching the AETN's nonprofit foundation and not the state of Arkansas. And this was a problem. Okay, matter of fact, this is Trent Garner, Republican Trent Garner, sums this up. I think what concerned me was that as a government agency, you entered into an agreement with PBS to make this documentary, and you did that using government resources through the agency. But the rights to that documentary and any revenue that will be generated through it was signed off to the foundation, which is a private nonprofit. That's what they've done. Now, their statement was, we appreciate the audit process and have made corrections to some unintentional errors, Pledger said after the meeting. Moving into the future, AETN is committed to reaching the network's full potential to serve Arkansas by supporting the cultural and civic life of our state, by forging deep community bonds through engagement, and by contributing authentic stories both locally and nationally that matter to Arkansans. So, we messed up, but we promise we won't do it again, I guess? That's the standard here? Anyway. AETN, tell me what you think about that, by the way. Do you think that Arkansas needs to be funding a television network? That's a whole question in and of itself, isn't it? Does Arkansas need to be funding an Arkansas Educational Television Network? I mean, it's essentially its own version of PBS. There's a lot of people that think that PBS shouldn't exist or that NPR shouldn't exist. I mean, let's just take NPR, since I'm a radio guy. All right, I'm familiar with NPR. I know about NPR, National Public Radio. It's a place where you can consistently go and get leftist opinions. And that's what National Public Radio is. That's what PBS is. Gosh, go watch the PBS coverage of the 2016 election on election night. It's almost better than watching George Snuffleupagus and Martha Raddatz and all the rest of it. PBS was pretty hilarious as well, to watch these liberals. They couldn't believe that Trump had won. Anyway, something to think about. Moving on. I didn't get to this last hour. By the way, we had a great last hour. We talked to economist Michael Busler. It was really, really fantastic. The Washington Times, James Comey, real quick. Not above the law. Trump indictment in play after presidency, says James Comey, according to the Washington Times. Former FBI Director James Comey said Thursday that he thinks President Trump likely has committed crimes that would be cause for an indictment once he leaves office, and were he not president, likely would have already been indicted. Listen to this. In a CNN town hall meeting, Mr. Comey was asked by Anderson Cooper whether Trump acted with corrupt intent to interfere with an ongoing investigation. Why is James Comey appearing at CNN town halls? Why is he going on the Today Show?
Well, if this is true, this first statement, Obama should be in jail.
I mean, this is so frustrating to me. But I mean, I guess my question is this. I mean, I don't ever know. I've never known of a former FBI director to essentially get fired and then make the rounds constantly on a press junket. Just constantly making the rounds and going on and defending himself. Essentially, James Comey is essentially going on national television constantly defending himself. I know he's attacking the president, but he's really doing this defending himself or a future defense. I think that's what this is here. They have to go after William Barr because they know that the investigation is underway into what caused the last 2 years. Christopher Steele, Hillary Clinton, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, Andrew McCabe, James Comey, James Clapper, John Brennan, and more. And they know it. And they know there's evidence out there. So you have to discredit Barr because they are looking in their crystal balls, and what they're seeing is a press conference, and when William Barr, probably press conference after press conference after press conference, where William Barr, in a monotone way, is going to announce what they found, or the Inspector General's report that's due out. It could be a lot of different scenarios, but the bottom line is, I don't think they're going to just let people, oh, you made a mistake. They're not going to let this, they're not going to AET in them. Our audit found that you did this. Okay, no big deal. That's not what's going to happen to these guys because the crimes here are much more serious. Much more serious. So Comey is going on the network television and going on liberal-friendly networks like CNN so that the media is perfectly teed up. Because they're not going to be like, oh, our credibility was questioned. We shouldn't have had James Comey on if there were ever charges against James Comey for, let's say, illegally leaking the memos to his professor friend that then leaked into the Washington Post that were that started the demands for the special counsel Robert Mueller to be appointed after he was fired. Like, if he were charged with that, now you've now discredited Trump. And you've discredited Barr in name only on your network, and now you can say, we're a banana republic. That's what they're going to say. This is a banana republic under Trump. He's just going after political enemies he doesn't like, and this is a dangerous precedent. This is a constitutional crisis. Can you believe that Trump is going after former Obama administration officials who were just doing their duty? They're now saying that the FBI spied. The New York Times is admitting the FBI spied on the Trump campaign. And Comey and others are out there saying, well, we put people next to campaigns pretending to be somebody else all the time. We would have been fired if we hadn't done it. No, that's not the same thing. There's surveillance and then there's spying. They're two different things. Sending somebody into a campaign who is pretending to be someone else, that is the very definition of spying. But now they're trying to say that it was the patriotic duty. You see what they're doing? They are setting this up beautifully. Keep Comey, keep McCabe going out there on the press circuit, admitting to crimes, but acting like it's no big deal. Admitting to trying to get the Joint Chiefs of Staff to throw Trump out of office with the 25th Amendment. Admitting to talking about wearing a wire so you can record the president and presumably blackmail him out of office. Admittedly doing all of this. These are all crimes, but the media is like, no big deal. Then calling them patriots for investigating, but really that's spying, illegal spying. They lied to the FISA court. And so that if the charges actually come for former Obama administration officials, they have lied to their viewers. They've continued to lie to them enough that now it's going to be perfectly fitting for them to say, wow, Trump really is a bad guy. That's what they're setting this up for. They've created a narrative to continue lying to their people. Telephone number is 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. We next have, just real quick, FBI's Steele story unravels. Claims debunked, leaks suspected before FISA application, according to newly unearthed memos, which were retroactively classified by the DOJ. We talked about this yesterday. A high-ranking government official who met with Christopher Steele in October 2016 determined that information in the Trump-Russia dossier was inaccurate and likely leaked to the media, according to The Hill's John Solomon. 10 days before the FBI used the now discredited dossier to apply for a Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act warrant to spy on the Trump campaign, Steele met with Deputy Assistant Secretary of State Kathleen Kavalik, who took handwritten notes of the encounter. Steele told Kavalik that Russia had a technical/human operation run out of Moscow targeting the election, which recruited U.S. Individuals to do hacking and recruiting. And he said payments for those recruited were made out of the Russian consulate in Miami, except that was a lie, as Kavalik noted, again, Deputy Secretary of State. There was no Russian consulate in the city of Miami. Anyway, more on this as it develops, but yeah, all of this is now, it's out there for anybody who wants to admit that people who have massive surveillance powers would more than likely use them. Unchecked surveillance powers would more than likely use them for personal political gain. And well, let's wait. We're gonna get to that. We've got Senator Terry Rice coming up at 7:33, and after that, we'll get to our meme of the day. Well, meme of the day. Sorry, Joe. Folks, it's Johnny Cash Friday. We're going to take a break. Going to be back here in just a moment. I guess my question was, it would have been one thing if we would have gone to the people and let's just, first of all, let's back up. Let's talk about the income tax cut. That was great. That was a great thing that the governor proposed, and I supported it. It was a clean bill, right? And it was just like, hey, we're going to take the income tax rate and we're going to take it from 6.9 to 5.9, over the next couple of years. So that was really good. And then it's like, well, we're gonna raise the gas tax, essentially get the amount of money that we just lowered the income tax, and then comes all of these other revenue generators as well. So
right, I would have rather just cut the taxes and let it be at that, and then made a 1% spending cut and put that towards highways. Take the casinos up on their offer, and taking all the taxes from the casinos, put that towards highways. Mm-hmm. There were other plans out there that just didn't get chosen. And that's how the process works. I mean, you offer your plan, and the body chooses the plan that they want to choose. That's how the process works.
So we're talking with State Representative Robin Lundstrom. There were two things that kind of happened towards the end of the session. And one of them was the Sanctuary Cities bill of Senator Gary Stubblefield. It was kind of controversial. It was really, the left kind of came out in full force. The Democrats saying this is wrong. Some people saying, I think one of your colleagues on the floor, a Democrat, said this was unchristian to do this. But you guys held strong, and you decided to say, listen, if there's a sanctuary city that pops up in Arkansas, we should be able to defund it.
That's right. Well, it shouldn't pop up now because we know ahead of time it's illegal. It's illegal, period, for sanctuary cities. We don't need sanctuary cities in this country. I think we don't need to fund them at all. If you have a sanctuary city in your state, you don't need to get any money whatsoever. No state money, no federal money, period. So sanctuary city just says bring all the illegal criminal individuals here. That's wrong. I didn't think it was that controversial at all. I thought it was appropriate and good timing, and off we went.
Yeah, well, and it was an example. I agree. To me, it's just a no-brainer. To you, it's a no-brainer. But the media, they certainly the mainstream media, they were covering it the way they were, and I just thought it was a good example of the Republican Party, especially at the last minute when it could have been easily tripped up with a snag. And there were some procedural maneuvers attempted to be made by State Representative Charles Blake to try to stop it because they all knew we were running out of time, and yet the governor signed it. It all went through. So it was a really good, I thought, really good moment for the state as a whole, and also in light of the fact, I don't know if you remember, but Robin, right after that, the news broke that the Homeland Security had a plan to take a lot of the illegal immigrants and then just dump them off in sanctuary cities, and so that was going on at the same time. So it was just a really good move by you guys. Now, there was another thing that happened towards the end of the session, and I'd just like to get your take on how that played out. You had the Senate, which is, according to, I'm told, House members, the lower chamber down there. The Senate votes on the DHS budget that includes funding for Arkansas Works Medicaid expansion, and 30 minutes later, we find out that a judge had struck down the work requirements, and then you guys the next day were expected to vote on it, and it didn't pass for about 24 hours, and then it did. Anyway, what are your thoughts on how all that worked out?
I've never been a private option supporter. That's no surprise. The only thing I've ever liked was when we added the work requirement. To me, that work requirement, and it was such a softball work requirement. Show up for 20 hours a week and get amazing insurance.
Well, remind all you Arkansas politicos out there, the scorecard season is going to be coming up pretty soon, where you're going to start having scorecards come out. There's going to be all kinds of scorecards. Yeah, there's going to be ones that you're going to need scorecards. Going to need scorecards for the scorecards. At least that was the new thing that happened last time. What Jimmy Hen did. Oh man, that's pretty funny. Remember that? Yeah. That was Senator Jim Hendren. Jimmy Hen. He needed to have a scorecard to rate all the scorecards. To make, I don't know why. I mean, it's what it is. Just one organization's opinion about what they were seeing in terms of the policies, the thoughts, the ideas that were pursued and enacted into law. Anyway, so yeah, Conduit for Commerce will have a scorecard, like they always do. And then there'll be other scorecards as well that go out there. Americans for Prosperity will have a scorecard. Family Council will have a scorecard. American Conservative Union will have scorecards. And so, yeah, it's getting ready for scorecard season, which are just really tools for voters to be more educated about, if they weren't following the session, say, as closely as I was and we were here at Conduit News. It's a kind of a good snapshot where you can see this bill did X and it yielded Y, and you voted for or against or whatever. Anyway, hey, we will be right back, by the way, with State Senator Terry Rice. He's going to be giving us his impression of the session. So don't go anywhere. Stay tuned, and thank you for starting the beginning of your weekend with us here at the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. We'll be back in just a moment.
I thought it was appropriate and good timing, and off we went.
Yeah, and you know, it was an example. I agree. To me, it's just a no-brainer. To you, it's a no-brainer. But you know, the media, they certainly the mainstream media, they were covering it the way they were, and I just thought it was a good example of you know, the Republican Party, especially at the last minute when it could have been easily, you know, tripped up with a snag. And there were some procedural maneuvers attempted to be made by State Representative Charles Blake to try to stop it, because they all knew we were running out of time, and yet, you know, the governor signed it. It all went through. So it was a really good, I thought, really good, you know, moment for the state as a whole, and also in light of the fact, I don't know if you remember, but Robin, right after that, the news broke that, you know, the Homeland Security had a plan to take a lot of the illegal immigrants and then just dump them off in sanctuary cities, and so that was going on at the same time. So it was just a really good move by you guys. Now, there was another thing that happened towards the end of the session, and I'd just like to get your take on how that played out. You had the Senate, which is, according to, I'm told, House members, the lower chamber down there. The Senate votes on the DHS budget that includes funding for Arkansas Works Medicaid expansion, and 30 minutes later, we find out that a judge had struck down the work requirements, and then you guys the next day were expected to vote on it, and it didn't pass for about 24 hours, and then it did. Anyway, what are your thoughts on how all that worked out?
I've never been a private option supporter. That's no surprise. The only thing I've ever liked was when we added the work requirement. To me, that work requirement, and it was such a softball work requirement. Show up for 20 hours a week and get amazing insurance. Sign me up. So to me, that was, I can't believe the judge struck it down. And also, people left the program because they had to work. Excuse me? That to me, and it wasn't asking people to work that were stay-at-home moms or elderly or disabled. It was people that were able to work, and it was a very tightly structured group of folks that could work. So it wasn't a heavy lift for those folks. So I'm glad that we're challenging it. I think that's going to be overturned.
Yeah.
And we'll be able to keep that component, and I think that's a good component. I think we need to do more of that.
Well,
the one thing I do agree with in the program, other than maybe moving everybody to Medicaid and then start making more requirements.
Yeah, you know,
but we don't have much options. That's an expensive program to work, and that's the one program that's probably more difficult on our state budget than any other.
Yeah. Yeah, and it may be kind of the reason. I mean, I've speculated that maybe the reason we've kind of gone after more money from the people, and we can't just do a straight, you know, tax cut without having it balanced on the other side is because,
well, sure,
you know, that program.
You've always got that 800-pound monster in the corner growling at you is private option. You never know when that's going to blow up. You can't cap it. You can't control it. It's huge. Your DHS is the biggest spender in our budget, period. And some of it's very needed. The stuff for special needs children, that's very needed. That's the kids that can't take
All right,
care of
folks, welcome
themselves.
back to the program. Thanks so much for being with us, 870-275-9799. Now, as promised, we do have on the line, as we've been talking about basically all show, Senator Terry Rice is back with us. Senator Rice, how are you? Thanks for coming on the program, sir.
Doing well, Paul. Thank you for the invitation. Glad to be with you.
Yes, sir. Now, District 9, remind everybody where that is geographically in the state.
District District 9, West Central Arkansas, parts of Sebastian, Franklin, and Crawford County, and all of my home county of Scott County.
Wow. Man, I love these big rural districts in the state. Well, let's just let you take it away. We'll start just generally. Senator Terry Rice, what was your impression of the session 2019?
Okay, well, let me touch on first on Johnny Cash Friday. Johnny Cash, along with Daisy Bates, will be going to Washington, D.C. We can talk about that more if you want to. The session itself was pretty intense for me. Lots of highs and lows. I'll touch on some things that we did in our committees that I chose. Continued to stay on Judiciary Committee. I've been on a long time in the House and Senate. Also left state agencies and went to city, county because Senate rules, we moved some of our gun and Second Amendment rights to city, county to kind of balance out the load. So we had some important stuff in both. In Judiciary, supported several bills carried by Senator Clark that led reform on child maltreatment. We don't talk much about that, but we needed reforms for DHS and the judicial process that gives some oversight and fairness to families, and again for the basic welfare of children, to make sure that government does it like they're supposed to. So we made.
Well, can I ask you about that, because I remember some of those reports that some specific, I believe one specific judge was mentioned in a report that I'm remembering where that just seemed to be this tendency for the judge to not let children go with family members that were related to the parents.
Yes.
Is that that's a problem, right?
Well, it has been, and that's what the result of this was. Going back, former Senator Linda Collins, that worked with us on that in joint performance review, and we heard from citizens and the judge. We had some headbutting back then with the judicial part, but this is a result of that work in past session. As you know, government moves slow, and we're finally getting some reforms in that are important. Also, in Judiciary, I supported, but we failed to get Stand Your Ground out. Missed it by one vote. It will be back. A lot of misrepresentation and consternation from some people on that, but I think we'll get it back on city, county. We passed Secretary Stubblefield's sanctuary city policy that you've talked about.
Yes.
We also passed the important resolution. Of all the resolutions we passed, I feel like this is the bell ringer to clarify gun rights, because of the Attorney General's opinion, the governor's statements, and so many people across Arkansas. It's been an education process. What Act 746 actually says and does. There's not any confusion for many of us, and law enforcement's getting more clear on it. But the AG had said they wanted clarification from the legislature, and the ones that had said that now have that. We passed, I think, 24 votes in the Senate, and it passed in the House, too. That was important. We also killed a bill that many on your program understand, but as I talk to people, they still don't know what red flag law is. We kill that in city, county. If it's going to interim study, it will be back from the side. It does not allow due process. Anybody that says that you can have two law enforcement people agree and go before a judge and go take somebody's firearms and their Second Amendment rights from their home without due process, you've got problems.
Mm-hmm.
We reduced, again, not my bill, but we supported through that committee, we reduced concealed carry licensing by half. Some of the things, and we'll go back and talk about whatever you go to. I carried the bill past Senate Bill 336, additional revenue for maintenance and repair of highways, streets, and bridges, $95 million. It is a percentage increase in the wholesale gas increase. We broke the ceiling in that. Some people don't talk about it. If you think about the ceiling, it does now have general funds in that bill, and we'll come back and talk about that.
Well, that was a big I know that's been a big want from a lot of people, and the governor just wasn't really on board, and he got on board with it this time. But yeah, can you talk about it? Why the gas tax increase? Like, why did you, Terry Rice, support this and vote for it?
I've been in Little Rock for almost 10 and a half years. Didn't plan on coming to start with. One of the things I've always pushed for is a stable, long-term highway funding bill. While I agree, you and I agree on many things, and we agree that this should have been general revenue, I have fought that battle and will continue to fight that battle. It's the reason I mentioned the general funding in this, because I feel that's where we need to move cars, car parts, auto-related things to the highway funding and take the burden off of other places. It wasn't going to happen in this administration. In 2013, former Representative Jonathan Barnett, in 86 of us House members, signed on to run a bill. When Governor Beebe fought it, people started peeling off, and it did not pass. We fought higher education for funding. We were trying to get general revenue. That is the basic bill. I can't say it's exact, but that is where Representative Julie Mayberry, came up this time with a good idea to use general revenue. But the problem is, they came late. Should have been done. We should have had a bill filed the first day of session what we were going to do in highway funding, and I said that over and over. We have been working on this literally for years and years to bring all groups together to find a way to do it. Is this a perfect bill? Is it the one I'd love to have? No. It is a long-term solution, and what we can do from there, if we have revenue to change, but as you know, in government, you can't always get the money where it needs to go.
I definitely understand that, and I also know, a lot of the reason why people voted for this tax increase was because they felt like the roads were in such a state of disrepair. Now, I disagree with this. I still wouldn't have voted for it, but they felt the roads were in such a state of disrepair that it's going to get to a point where it's even more expensive to repair them in the long run. And so I understand, people make the argument for it. My concern, and I'd like to get your response on that, I know we had a good income tax cut, $95 million eventually, when it fully goes into effect. But this gas tax is going to go into effect in October. The internet sales tax is going to go into effect in July. Then we have the half-cent sales tax that's going to not be allowed to sunset if the people decide. Do you think that when it's all said and done, the people of Arkansas are going to be paying more money to the government than they were in, say, fiscal year 2020 and 2021?
Yes. And from the 92nd General Assembly, this was saying, Paul, I think of this as building a house. You step up and make investments, big investments that are going to be long-term. This is not something small for me. When I agreed to carry this bill, I didn't write the bill, but I carried it and was standing by my decision. One, you don't pass a gas tax without huge support. We had, on the first vote, it was like too less on concurrence, but we had 75 votes in Senate, I think 71 in the House. That tells you the people are telling their elected representatives, we want some roads fixed. And it's not just because roads are going down. We've got bridges that are showing rusting rebar where concrete is flaked away and broke off, that while it may not be deadly right now, you've got to do something about that. We've had where the white line is on the side of the road, where there's voids that have broken out past the white line towards the center line, where when you're crowded meeting 18-wheeler, you won't bust a wheel. I busted two of them, cracked wheels. So the cost of highways is, yes, costs money. It is a use tax, and just on the wear and tear of cars and cost is something that's important. Let me run on through these, and we'll come back.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned the what you call internet tax. I call it the fair tax. And I've supported this for a long time. I agree with your when you say It's not going to change the way people buy. I agree with that. As a retailer, the internet is a convenient way to buy 24 hours a day if you want to. It's the fairness issue. Arkansas has had a law for many years that you remit the tax. People didn't do it because it wasn't enforced. It now the Supreme Court decision is, let's just have a fair tax. Let's either pay tax or don't pay tax. But it is a fairness issue, and I know it gets into the thing for federal government and other states, and all it's a complicated deal, but I do support fair tax. We had a very pro-life session.
Yes.
Very proud of that. We passed something I hadn't heard you talk about, but I know it was something you were interested in. We passed, I say we, it's a legislative body, passed an optometry bill that was mentioned to me by the sponsor last night. That broke a ceiling on the scope of practice. We need to see more of that. With safeguards, we need to let more competition and more access to certain practices. We passed, again, the $97 million tax cut. We'd already passed the low and mid-range tax cuts. This was upper end. We passed some unemployment tax cut. And I'll remind people, I'm not excusing tax increases. I will happily take questions or field anything on that. In my 10 years down here, the legislature has cut $500 million in taxes over the last decade. Again, there's going to be raises if the people choose, and it's up to them. I voted to refer this half-cent tax, if they want to extend it, for investments for roads, for state, county, and city roads. And that's jobs and infrastructure. It's economic development. I was very disappointed in not getting through Representative Payton's. I carried it on the Senate in the used car tax exemption. It was increasing from $4,000 to $7,500, where you could get a reasonable, good quality used car. Has touched really all kinds of families, because if the mother and dad don't drive one, the kids drive one, or going to college have one. And we fought, and he had huge support for that, and did in both ends. And couldn't get it. I had 5-vote agreement to get it through the Senate Revenue and Tax, and couldn't get, it gets busy and couldn't get all 5 there. I was very disappointed in the suspension of the work requirements on the Medicaid increases, and as we know, the private option ramifications are still being discovered as Arkansas's percentage of cost goes up.
On that, do you think, some of these revenue increases from the people to the government, you think that's because of, we were supposed to only be paying $50 million in, to Arkansas Works, and it ended up costing us $138 this year. So
no doubt, Paul.
No doubt.
You and I and people that are attending to it know that. That's what's driving the whole thing.
Yeah. Senator Terry Rice, I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you, explaining, your thought process and your rationale, and I appreciate the discussion and your impression of the session. Let me ask you one more question. What on the Judiciary Committee, you mentioned this earlier, on the Judiciary Committee, what was going through your head when Senator Stephanie Flowers told your colleague, Senator Alan Clark, to go to hell?
That was a very intense few minutes, and out of the seriousness of that I hope we don't go through again, it turned out to be one of the better dialogues that I've had, and I hate to get in the individual, but Senator Flowers worked better after that through whatever came out of that.
Wow.
Worked better in the committee after that, was more, I think, responsive was to me and other members. It's one of those things, it blew up, and then it got better after that.
Wow.
That's the way I could describe it. It was odd.
Yeah, it certainly was. Senator Terry Rice, I appreciate it, sir. Thank you so much. I hope you have a great weekend.
I appreciate what you do. Have a good day.
All right, you too. Folks, 870-275-979 is the telephone number, and we're going to be back here in just a minute. Actually, we're going to check in with Congressman Rick Crawford. Don't go anywhere.
Oh, I thought it was appropriate and good timing, and off we went.
Yeah, and it was an example. I agree. to me, it's just a no-brainer. To you, it's a no-brainer. But, the media, they certainly, the mainstream media, they were covering it the way they were. And I just thought it was a good example of the Republican Party, especially at the last minute when it could have been
Are you
easily,
tired of rolling your eyes as your professor regurgitates progressive, PC, neo-Marxist nonsense? Then you should interview on Conduit News Radio's Young Conservative segment and tell us about why you believe the way you do. Tell us how you came to be a conservative and what are your views on government. Now, if you're worried that your neo-Marxist professor may also be a right-wing talk radio listening masochist, then names can be changed to protect the innocent. It's the Conduit News Radio Conservative Future segment. To be interviewed, call 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799.
Ever wonder why Europeans seem to speak so many languages? Maybe it's because they use Babbel, the number one.
Oh, I thought it was appropriate and good timing, and off we went.
Yeah, well, and it was an example. I agree. To me, it's just a no-brainer. To you, it's a no-brainer. But the media, they certainly, the mainstream media, they were covering it the way they were. And I just thought it was a good example of the Republican Party, especially at the last minute when it could have been easily tripped up with a snag. And there were some procedural maneuvers attempted to be made by State Representative Charles Blake to try to stop it because they all knew we were running out of time, and yet the governor signed it. It all went through. So it was a really good. I thought really good, moment for the state as a whole, and also in light of the fact, I don't know if you remember, but Robin, right after that, the news broke that the Homeland Security had a plan to take a lot. All right, folks, welcome back to the program. Thanks so much for being with us. Joining us on the phone line as we're running out of time this hour, we have Congressman Rick Crawford on the phone. Rick, thanks for coming back on, sir.
You bet.
Let's talk a little bit about what's going on up there at the Capitol. We had the House Judiciary Committee. They're holding William Barr in contempt. Is it just a circus?
Oh, it's a circus, and it's they're just doing this for effect. They know that obviously that the Attorney General is following the law. This is primarily a committee of attorneys, and yet they're not. They must have been absent today. They taught law at law school because he's following the law, and they're holding him in contempt for it.
You can't have grand jury testimony be made public. I mean, it's so
Correct.
one-sided. The prosecutor's just trying to present their best case, and it just seems. I had this idea, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I kind of think that maybe you have William Barr that they're trying to discredit, so that if there are charges that come against former Obama administration officials, they've now they can just say, well, this is a banana republic and Trump's going after his political enemies. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, there's definitely some merit to that thought. I think that what they're preparing for is the fact that they've got an attorney general now who's expressed a willingness to actually try to get to the bottom of this whole Russia collusion thing. Because the truth is, there was Russia collusion. It just wasn't with the Trump team. It was with the Hillary Clinton team and the DNC. And so now there's somebody in a position to actually investigate and bring these facts out. And we've already got evidence that shows that. The dossier was commissioned by the Clinton campaign, paid for by the Hillary Clinton campaign. So when she goes on TV and she has the temerity to say that the election was stolen from her, it's not just sad and funny and all those other. It's really it's laughable that she would say that. But given the fact that she made the statement that it's not appropriate for a president to challenge the outcome of the election, for a candidate to challenge the outcome of the election when everybody was of a mind that she was going to win, then nobody would challenge it. But the fact that she's actually not only guilty of collusion with the Russians on that front, commissioning that report and trying to interfere with the Trump campaign, but also with the Uranium One thing that still has yet to be fully investigated and adjudicated.
Yes. former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee was subbing in on Fox News channel for Laura Ingraham, and they had a guy by the name of Joe DeGeneva on, who said that the FBI hired 4 independent contractors to spy on Americans 4 years before the presidential election. Do you know anything about that, Rick?
Well, apparently Comey has copped to that they routinely place investigators in close proximity to campaigns. Really, that's news to me, and it's not appropriate. I didn't realize we had the FBI now monitoring federal election campaigns, presidential campaigns. But apparently Comey said something to that effect, and I think the best action Comey could take at this point in time is to stay off TV and find him a really good lawyer.
Yes. And I think that kind of goes back to the William Barr speculation of, you got to, if you promote Comey on all these networks, then if something happens to him with charges, the networks can then say, again, this is a banana republic and Comey's a Boy Scout. We're talking with Congressman Rick Crawford. We don't have a lot of time left, but I know, Rick, that you did an event here in Jonesboro a couple of weeks ago to highlight human trafficking. And a lot of people think this is something that only goes on other places, only goes on at the border, but it happens right here in our own communities, doesn't it?
That's absolutely right. In fact, the information that they brought out shows that about 60% of the human trafficking victims are actually U.S. citizens. And we don't think about it. We think it's basically these people coming up from, the Northern Triangle and Mexico, places like that are being trafficked. And they are. They are being grossly abused and misused. But the fact is that the bulk of the human trafficking that takes place here at home is 60% of it are United States citizens. So it's something that we should be diligent about, learn what the warning signs are, what the appropriate action is that we can take, and what to watch for.
Yeah, and we saw it in some headlines locally. I remember you had, I think it was a owner of a Chinese restaurant, and he was charged, and he had some girl, I think, in his apartment. It was just you to think, wow, this is happening, and so we need to watch for warning signs as well, right?
Absolutely, and all this is modern day slavery. We have the 21st century euphemism of human trafficking, but it's slavery is what it is. I mean, indentured servitude, you call it what you want, but it's slavery, and many of these people, obviously, primarily the women, but even some of the young boys are being forced into prostitution and indentured servitude. They never get out of this debt cycle. They pay some entity to help get them into the country, and they never get away from them. It's impossible. And so, we've the presentation from Homeland Security and their cadre of investigators was very eye-opening, and I hope we'll get a chance to do it again next year. And we had really good turnout from the community, not only just the general public, but obviously our law enforcement, our social service providers, mental health professionals, educators, and so on, that are going to be on the front lines of identifying and helping to protect these victims.
Wow. Congressman Rick Crawford, it's always great to talk to you, to have you on. I appreciate the work that you're doing, and again, I know, being on that House intelligence community, you certainly know a lot, and trying to educate the public and serving them well. So,
well, I appreciate it. Thanks, Paul.
All righty, thank you. Rick Crawford, everybody. Folks, it's time for the meme of the day. On that, this is the meme of the day. We have liberals trying to explain how there is no evidence of how no evidence of collusion doesn't mean there's no evidence of collusion. And we have this meme up from Always Sunny in Philadelphia's Charlie Kelly. Essentially has the string in the newspaper, the spider webs, like well, no, you don't understand. See, yeah, I haven't slept in 3 days. I've been up, just just down in coffee and smoking cigarettes. I'm just down in coffee and smoking cigarettes, and I've got everything. No, you don't understand. And there's no evidence of collusion, but let me show you how the no evidence of collusion means that there's evidence of collusion. If you have a meme, send it to us. We might make it the meme of the day. Arkansas, I hope you have a great weekend. And I hope it's fun. I hope it's relaxing. And we'll see you here on Monday. We'll have bells on. It'll be 6 o'clock. And Arkansas, be safe.